if people actually look at where we've come relative to where we are, it's pretty obvious that we're living in this great, amazing time. And even if you just zoom down on our company, right? This idea that we're democratizing the opportunity to get in the wine industry. When have you ever had a fair market in the wine industry? And that's just one example of free markets finally starting to come into play, decentralization coming into play.
I'm Joe Lonsdale. Welcome to the American Optimist. I'm really excited to be here in the heart of Napa Valley with my good friend Jake Kloberdanz today. Jake, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Joe. Love the American Optimist. I'm an American Optimist with you. So.
You are an optimist. Well, we're here in one of the most beautiful parts of Napa. We just finished this awesome winery at One Hope. It took you've been working on it for 6 years or so to get this winery up and running.
That's right. We started the home in 2016 and finished it in 2018 and broke ground on the winery in 2018 and just finished it at the end of the year in 2020.
And this area is pretty cool. We're near some of our favorite places like Stagland and Opus One. And what appealed to you about this part of Napa?
Well, we're amongst the greatest wine families to ever make wine, not only in Napa, but really at a global scale. And so right in the heart of it, about halfway through the 30-mile corridor that makes up the Napa Valley. And if you want to be one of the best and one of the greatest of your generation, there's no better way to do it than to put yourself alongside the best who've done it before you.
So Jake and I are childhood friends. We played Little League Baseball together. Jake went on to be a Cal football and rugby player. I did not go on to be a college athlete, but we're still somewhat competitive. And Jake, One Hope Wine, which you started 14 years ago now, it's a for-profit wine company, but it gives a lot of its profits to charity and helps charitable causes.
Yeah, that's right. So we our purpose is to nourish the future. We serve it every day by sharing wine and giving hope. And getting to go to school around here, and some of the greatest things I learned were through sports. We started as young men or young boys, learning teamwork there, and learning a few other great tips and things along the way that made us better leaders, I think. But it was really at Cal Rugby that competitive nature started to take over to the next level. So,
Cal Rugby, you guys won the nationals there a little bit?
We did. We won a couple national championships, and the things I learned there that were a little different than our high school, because you and I both know we were big fish in a small pond as athletes at our school. We were more of an academic school.
Mission San Jose High School is very good at academics. We were top in math and chess.
Yeah, and pretty good at badminton too, if I recall. So,
there's a lot of Asian kids there.
There were, and so when I went to Berkeley, it was my first time really joining a championship organization. I came in, we had won 12 national championships in a row. Which was a college record. Only like North Carolina women's soccer team had done that previously. And I, of course, broke the streak when I came along. We lost in the semifinals, but we came back. We lost to Air Force, who was a great athletic team, and they beat us up that year. But we came back the next day and we beat Army 70-3. And I think that speaks to some of the stuff that I learned there. Our standard was always our own standard. It wasn't about how we performed necessarily against other teams, because we'd usually crush all of them.
But then you won. Then you won the nationals the next year.
Then we won 3 more years in a row, national championships, and so that level of resilience. One of the things, Jack Clark's one of the greatest coaches of all time in any sport in college, but particularly in rugby, is the greatest in the history of the U.S. at least. And one of the things he'd always talk about was mental toughness and the ability to make the next best play under any circumstance, even if you just got punched in the face. Do whatever the next best play was for your team, and that was never punching someone back in the face and getting a red card. It was about making that next play and being present. And he also, the values that everybody on the team had to live up to. There were values that were musts on the team, and so I remember him cutting our captain my first year playing there. He was our star player, our best player, and he carried that over, and he committed to it because he broke some of the team rules that were musts. So.
He broke the rules, so he got cut. But is that why you lost the nationals? How's that work?
I take that back. He actually, it was my second year there, and we did win the nationals. The year before, he was our captain too, and we lost them with him. And so that was the learning experience.
So that's an interesting example for you. Even the top talent needs to be cut if they're not following the values of what you're doing.
Yeah, I think so. And you know,
we did that at Palantir too early on. There was someone who was really, really bright, but they weren't really someone who was a team player in the right way, and they weren't respecting the engineers in the right way, so they couldn't fit into the culture.
Yeah, brilliant jerks are hard to work with for too long, and I think that was the first time I had seen it really put into work, like someone following what they said they were going to do.
It really changes a culture when you see that happen.
That's right. And then one of the themes was entitled to nothing and grateful for everything, and I think that level of not ever feeling entitled to anything created a sense of rigor and work ethic. And we talked a lot about mental toughness and work ethic, being able to make up for mistakes along the way, as long as you were learning and your rate of learning was going up. And I think all those carried over to my career and my ability to be a better leader.
So you've been a leader now for 14 years of One Hope. How many bottles of wine is One Hope going to sell this year? What's the current pace you're on?
We're going to sell over 2.5 million bottles.
2.5 million bottles of wine.
Months, yeah.
That has to make you one of the top 50 or so
We're definitely in the top 100 by volume out of over 11,000 now, and the top 50, the top 63 is 500,000 cases. So we have our eyes on doing that by 2024.
Okay.
And
so you're breaking the top 50 in a couple of years.
Yep, that's right.
And that's a good pace you're on, because a lot of those companies have been around for decades.
Yeah, and we'll be the largest direct-to-consumer wine brand in the U.S. in the next couple of years too. So that'll put us there, because it's very rare to be that size and be doing 90% of your business direct-to-consumer. So that's the unique part. All the other 63 do the majority of that through restaurants and hotels and stuff like that.
So there's a lot of pessimism around business in our country from a lot of people right now. They think business means taking advantage of people. They think you only really get rich by doing the wrong things. You're obviously dedicated to doing the right thing. So what kind of impact has One Hope had to date, and how do you think about business and positive impact?
Yeah, we're just coming up on $8 million donated, so we're over $7 million right now.
Donated to what?
Donated to a handful of categories: hunger, water, health, and education, things that help people break the cycle of poverty. But then we also donate to causes of choice for hosts all around the country. So our goal is to democratize the Napa Valley wine tasting experience, give people an even playing field to be able to compete and build a wine business, because it's almost nobody who doesn't inherit a wine business or isn't one of the big conglomerates is ever able to break into the wine business. And so
they always tell me a good way to make $1 million in wine is to start with tens of millions of dollars.
Yeah, it's the age-old adage. It made it a pretty hard company to get capitalized along the way, because I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. And frankly, it's a very capital-intensive business, and that's true for most wine businesses, because they work within the traditional confines of the wine industry.
They're trying to do it for fun, and they're trying to do what's called three-tier distribution, right? So most of the time,
right.
If you're selling wine, you're selling it to distributors, to retailers, to consumers, or distributors to restaurants to consumers.
Yep, and that's if you're lucky. Sometimes there's a broker or another broker or two in between there.
So there's another tier as well.
Yeah, so if you're looking at international wines, a lot of times there's an international broker to a distributor to a retailer to the end consumer. And then in Texas, they have the 4-tier system, so there is one more layer in between.
So there's some cronyism I'm going to have to go fix in Texas, is what you're telling me.
Well, yeah, exactly. I think that we're doing it. I think you're doing it with us through One Hope. Is you're kind of disrupting that, and e-commerce and the ability to communicate directly with your end consumer and ship right to their doorstep has changed the game.
And you said you're empowering cause entrepreneurs around the country. So you have a lot of people, I guess mostly women, around the country hosting events, teaching people about the wine, teaching people about charity. How many people now are selling wine around the country for?
Over 10,000, and 99% of them are women, and over half of them are moms. Usually the alcohol industry has been very male dominated, and a lot of older men at that. And so we're very differentiated in that regard. We like the idea of putting money in the pockets of moms instead of the average old guard liquor distributors and stuff like that. And that is part of our purpose, alongside the $8 million donated. Also giving people a platform to bring people together around wine and raise more money.
So this is moms bringing their communities and their friends and teaching them about wine, and usually they're raising also for a charity they care about while they're doing it?
That's right. So we'll have hosts who raise money for their kids' school or for their breast cancer walk or something that's important to them. It can be local or global. We've donated to over 20,000 nonprofits through that part. So we donate for every bottle towards these larger global causes of hunger, water, health, and education. But then we also give our hosts us the opportunity to hold a wine party and donate an additional 10% towards their cause of choice. And we let them choose from our database, and all their event orders go through their event link, and it automatically cuts a check.
And some of them will donate
cause.
a lot. Some of them may donate less and keep more for themselves, depending what they're doing.
Everybody donates 10%, and then they get another 10% rewards, and they can choose to donate that or keep it for themselves
if they need it economically.
And stuff. Yeah.
So let's back. So you have this giant wine company. It's growing really fast. It's doing really well. You have this beautiful property. Let's go back 14 years. You started off by selling wine out of the trunk of your car, I believe.
That's right. We started with 168 cases, 3 pallets. We did it custom crush over the hills, right over the hills here, over the Mayacamas in Sonoma. And we made 3 pallets of wine. I drove it in a U-Haul truck over the Grapevine down to LA, where I was living at the time. We loaded up in a public storage unit, and a handful of people.
Was it a refrigerator public storage unit?
It actually wasn't. But
is that a good idea for wine to keep it?
It wasn't the best storage space, no. But we sold it pretty quickly. But yeah, we've come a long way since that public storage unit. There's no doubt. It was pretty reasonable. It's towards the middle of the storage unit, so it stayed a little cool, you know.
And so you originally started off selling these 168 cases out of your car in an unrefrigerated storage unit. You do refrigerate all the wines.
Yeah, we do. We do hold all of them in perfect storage temperature now, and we have fulfillment centers in multiple places around the country, and it allows us to ship, over 95% of our shipments in 2 days or less by ground.
How'd you go? Like, so you sold this wine, and you had to buy more wine and sell more wine. Like, how'd this become a real business? It seems like a very hard thing to get going.
Yeah, well, breaking into the distribution world is hard in and of itself. We started it in 2007, and so our first full year was 2008, and the recession just hit. And so the first distributor we ever got in California had just dropped 60 brands. We were the only brand they picked up that following year at the end of the year. But for a year and a half, we were selling out of the back of our cars, and we would come the next day and deliver it. So that was our relationship.
So you think because you had this personal relationship with them, and then because it had a charitable cause, it was an advantage?
That was the only reason that I can imagine people were buying it. Our wine was average at the time. We didn't have economies of scale, so it wasn't like a great deal. They were buying it for the cause. They were buying it for the purpose. They were buying it for our enthusiasm and our soul. So.
And now the wine's winning awards and has gotten a lot better.
Yeah, we have over 20 wines that have 90-point ratings in our portfolio right now. We have 3 coming out that are rated 97 to 99 points by Robert Parker, which is really exciting.
How much do those cost if they were like 97 points?
Those are $100 plus bottles for sure. A couple of them are probably actually going to crack the $200 price point.
But some of the 90 plus point wines are also $20-25.
Yeah, we have wines on our site that are $25 retail that are 96 and 97 points.
So how do you make good wine for only that much money? Like, how's this business work? Tell us about the seedy underbelly. What's actually happening here?
Yeah, so one in Napa, we're in the epicenter of great wines, at least for the U.S. And so the next wine is better than the next is better than the next, and that chase after that 100-point wine is kind of this goofy thing to some of us because it's so subjective. So you want to create really memorable, great wines, and our brand promise starts at being able to bring that to people's doorsteps for $25 and under when they buy it by the case. And when we think about making great wines, it starts in the vineyards. And so grapes are really a commodity. So you can actually buy incredible grapes for a pretty reasonable price, even the best grapes. Where the real differentiation is made is after, because you can only control so much in the vineyards, the terroir here, the sun, the light, the water, those are variables that.
So we're sitting in Rutherford as part of Napa right now. The terroir is the earth.
Yes.
And then water, the sun. This is supposed to be one of the very best places for cab. But you're saying even though it's one of the very best places, the grapes are not that expensive to buy.
Yeah, they're more expensive than the average as you go throughout the rest of the state. But relative to that bottle of wine, generally the grapes are 10 to 15% of the cost. And then you have the processing and the winemaking and all the packaging and all of that stuff. And then a lot of it comes down to the brand equity and how people connect with that brand. And the greatest brands go beyond just providing somebody a really good wine. They remind people of the place. They remind people of the people they were with. And so we say, a good wine will remind you of the wine, but a great wine will remind you of the place and the people you're with. And if you can bring people a memory through the smell of wine, through the taste of wine, and bring them back to a place, then you can do something that very few wines can do. And so the other part of it is like creating great consistent wines year to year that are your everyday drinker, and then creating extraordinary wines when you talk about those more expensive small supply wines.
How do you do that? How do you create the extraordinary wines? Is it
First, you have to build relationships with the farmers that farm the best vineyards here, and so that was one of the hardest places when you talk about the underbelly, right? One of the hardest things I did was creating trust and relationships with some of the greatest farmers in the Napa Valley, because there's a lot of people who are really passionate about growing the best grapes, but they're not marketers. They don't want to sell the wine. They just want to farm. And so you go and find them and you give them a house. We're a very asset light business. So we own about 1% of our vineyards, and we work with some of the best vineyard families in the world.
We're looking at the ones you own right here. Pretty much,
right here in Rutherford. We're at the Rutherford bench. People like Opus One, Robert Mondavi to our south, Cakebread, Staglin, they've made Rutherford a really special place. And people talk about the Rutherford dust that Andrei Chelyachev brought to this valley. And that phrase really alludes to the kind of cocoa powder, chocolatey finish that you get in a lot of these wines that are right here on the bench, which is on the west side of Highway 29, just at the base of the Mayakama Mountains. And you get a lot of that fertile silt coming down the mountains and the rainwater, and it washes through this property and out towards the middle of the valley out to the river. So it is really the holy land for wine in the US, and because of that, it's attracted some of the best winemakers from all over the world. So there really is this network effect going on.
And then you build relationships with the farmers, get access to the grapes. You then build relationships with the people who are doing the next part, or what?
Early on, we were able to partner up with the Mondavi family, and Rob Mondavi Jr., Robert Mondavi's grandson, the creator of Robert Mondavi and Opus One, and really, I think the pioneer of our last generation who put Napa on the map, along with a few others. Rob would make our wines along with Tony Coltrane, their longtime family winemaker. We started getting to a scale where we really needed our own full-time winemaker that would just do our wines, and so we hired a woman named Mari Wells Coyle, and she's an extraordinary winemaker. She's the one who's made some of these incredible rated wines and gotten these accolades. Rob's also worked with her on collaborations, and so we do all of our winemaking in-house, even though we outsource the majority of our farming. So we're very asset light, but then we control the processing from that point forward, even though we also borrow other people's wineries to continue to stay asset light.
So buying good grapes is important, and then you making sure you do the process yourself in order to get the 90+ points.
Yep, you got to have that's definitely the magic, the oak aging in the wine. So
how long do you age most of the way? If you're buying a $25 bottle, how long did that age for?
$25 bottles, usually we're aging it 4 to 6 months versus some of the really complex extraordinary wines in our iconic collection and reserve collection. The reds will be 22 to sometimes 33 months. We have a new kosher wine that just came out that was aged 33 months. We've got a red diamond AVA from Washington, one of the best rated AVAs in general in the world, and that's 30 months aged. And then our Fumé Blanc here is 10 months aged in New French Oak as a white wine, and so we'll age some of the nicer white wines 10 to 12 months.
And then you'll age the wine, and then you bottle it.
Yeah, then you bottle it.
Pretty cool looking bottles. This is one of your fafavorite white wines here, the Fumé Blanc. It's one of my favorite white wines, actually. It's pretty good.
Yeah, what's really special about these wines when they're estate grown is, on the back we point out the specific block that the wine comes from. So that little blue block that we highlight on the back, this aerial visual is right here. Yep. And so when you get this small production, we only make about 500 to 600 cases of that a year. You'll actually zero in on the specific block on the very specific vineyard that you made that wine, and it brings you back to that very specific place and very specific vintage year, where with the $20 to $25 wines, you're really looking for consistency. So there's a lot of great technology that the new world has come out with over the last couple decades, and even though some of the old world turns their nose up on it, it allows us to create very, very consistent wines year to year for that price point, because a lot of people at that price point don't want it to change year to year with the weather and all of the other
They
variables.
want the same wine they really like.
They want the same wine they really like, and so you can do technical analysis on it and measure the acidity and the sugar.
So the very high-end wines, it's like this is a 2016 versus a 2012, whereas some of the other wines are just really good wines and people want the same one, and you can just neutralize it, so it's the same thing every year.
Yeah, or close enough to it. Yeah, and actually, people would think that the consistency would be higher if you source from the exact same block every year, but actually, then the weather has a chance of affecting it a lot more, right?
Are you doing blends for these to make them more consistent? They're taking from multiple places?
You're because when you're talking about tens of thousands of cases of volume,
then you can blend stuff so that way you get the average.
Exactly, and you still want to source from the best regions. So we source from Napa, Sonoma, the Central Coast, which are the 3 best regions of California. But because you're able to blend them together, you're able to have a lot more flexibility year to year and make a more consistent.
I remember
wine.
when you were first looking at doing a really beautiful place, you're looking in the Sierras. There's some other vineyards out there that are pretty good, but they're not as good and they're not as popular, huh?
Yeah, they don't have the mystique that Napa has. They're not known as the very best region. They're incredible growing areas, but what Napa's done really well is protect that brand and create a global brand here where it's known for the best agriculture and the best winemakers and the best brands.
So you attract the top talent, kind of like how tech centers attract the top talent.
That's right. Like people will always challenge whether Silicon Valley really gets the better engineers, and certainly there's little pockets in Austin and New York and other places where you can compete. But at the end of the day, until the best engineering talent isn't going to Silicon Valley,
it's still a really important place for everything.
Exactly, and that's what Napa Valley is to the wine industry, is what Silicon Valley is to the technology industry in the U.S.
Let's step back a little bit from the wine process itself and talk a little bit more about cause-centric commerce. This is something, obviously, you're one of the first successful companies in this area that's really focused on commerce, focusing on a cause. Why? First of all, why do you take that approach? What inspired you to do that?
Well, I loved when I first saw in the grocery stores companies using causes to market their brand and creating alignment and a mutually beneficial relationship between their brand and some nonprofit where they would increase sales, and by doing so they'd also donate a portion to that cause. I thought it was really cool, and it actually spoke to me. I was a consumer that cared about that, but I also thought it was pretty gimmicky, that it was temporary and it'd be a few weeks during October for Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and then by November all of the pink ribbons would be gone. And so the idea was build it into the brand year round, make it authentic, make it woven into the fabric of the brand.
And it's kind of interesting, rather than giving Tiger Woods $10 million or whatever, you're giving that $10 million to a charity, and then hopefully getting consumers to support you for doing that, because it's a better place where they want their money to be going.
That's right. And I think with us, it's not only inspiring our consumers, it's inspiring us to be able to attract some of the best talent in the wine industry. It inspires us to attract like-minded investors who are really purpose-driven. It's made us able to attract people like the Mondavi family, who is really purpose-driven.
So it gives you cost-centered commerce because you're supporting a cause. Everyone wants the company to win. Obviously, I got involved as chairman in part because you're helping to support this company. It's going to win, and it's going to help a lot of other people. Right?
That's right. I think you said it best, actually, when you started getting involved. You were like, I believe there's going to be a great ROI on every dollar invested, and it'll return more than $1 back into the community and in the form of impact. So that win-win of still being an IRR that hits the spot, on top of it being able to create much more than $1 donated for $1 invested, created that extra bonus. And I do think having that purpose, a really deep purpose will always more than outperform what you're investing into it. A perfect example is our first year, we only had enough to be able to donate $10,000. This was pre any outside financing. This was when my mom had given me 10 grand of equity and I had $75,000 on credit cards. And the amount of passion and purpose that our team felt about that first $10,000 donated, how quick does a startup spend $10,000 in today's world? But that created that passion, that extra work and rigor around it. So,
and I mean, how would you recommend other entrepreneurs, other builders think about their cause and how they can add cause to what they're doing?
I think being really intentional and authentic about what is important to you and your company and the people at your company, the community of people who are going to buy your product and or support your service. And then also taking a step back and saying, as a business, what do we have competitive advantages in? What fits our business model, right? For us,
that's the the wine train in the background.
I know, the wine train passes right in front of our property, that frontage on St. Helena Highway. But I think if you are able to take a step back, and for us it was, hey, we have wine, and wine brings people together, and when they come together they're able to share a cause that they're passionate about, and people not only can buy the wine and raise donations towards that cause, they can also make a direct donation. It's also about awareness. And so for us, some of the causes that we serve are really important to our community of cause entrepreneurs, their customers, and the people that are our from our supply chain all the way to our customer,
Your support, well, in supply chain, for example, you support a lot of the farm workers' health here in Napa.
That's exactly right. We, for our iconic collection, which is our smallest production wine. So, for example, Fumé Blanc is in our iconic collection for white, and then our highest end small production red wines are Cabernets from Atlas Peak, Oakville, Rutherford, Howell Mountain, some of the best AVAs around here, which is American Viticultural Area. All of those help donate to the local farm workers. We support a group called Olay Health, which helps provide health care for 60% of the Napa Valley farm workers.
That's a pretty neat idea. A lot of people in their companies, maybe one of the things that they could do is they could support people supporting their supply chain or whatnot.
That's exactly right.
Maybe Apple, instead of just like letting them be slaves in China, could support, for example, these people so like in some way to be free or whatnot.
That would be really nice of them. There's a few things Apple could probably work on to be a little more purpose-driven beyond what they already do. But I think for us, you're exactly right. Recently, I was realizing we're giving out all these holiday grants, and we were giving out grants for education. And right here on the property, we have a handful of people that are part of our hospitality team and work so hard. And they have children that are first generation going to college, and they're Mexican American, which is, by the way, who powers the Napa Valley. It's literally and figuratively the people who have built this industry on their back here. And so I started thinking about,
are some of these families starting to thrive more? Like we're talking about America as a whole. Like what's the experience right now of the Mexican families in Napa, as far as you know?
They really are, from the snapshot that I get to see. And when I think about our team here, just the idea that they're sending their kids to college, and their kids are getting college education. And granted, you and I could talk about how important a college education will actually be going forward, and how much of that is brand versus true education. But the idea of higher education and being the first in their family, and their parents giving them that opportunity, they're only really one generation behind what you and I
how are the parents able to afford that as farm workers?
Well, these people are in hospitality, but as farm workers, like, a lot of it comes through grants, and a lot of it comes through the support of the wineries around here. And so Napa's extremely charitable and gives back a lot relative to the U.S., who relative to the rest of the world gives back a lot as in the corporations. But here it is a big focus, in addition to building a health clinic for our farm workers so that they could all get quality health care. And we built a beautiful center in downtown Napa for LA Health, and we're part of that. But on top of it, groups like us are starting to think this way and support the education of not only them, but also their future generation.
How do you think about the duty of the corporation here? Because there's different points of view. Some people say you have a good mission and then you just make profit and that's enough. And some people say that if there's people around your community who are suffering, it's your job as a corporation to go and figure out and solve those problems. And how do you approach this?
Yeah, so I don't think that it's everybody's duty to have to donate to a specific nonprofit. There's other ways to give back to the community and to get involved. I do think it's everybody's duty to get involved in the community and help give back along the way, not just at the tail end. You back in the day, you used to make a lot of money in your lifetime, and then you'd bequeath it to your kids and maybe to a university at the end of your life. And I really think you and I understand the time value of money, and donating and volunteering today, it compounds down the road, or it should. And so when I think about it, it's really a progression, and it should be at the heart of a business from the very beginning, even if it's really small.
To be involved in your community.
Yeah, to be involved in your community and returning value to your customers beyond just providing your product and service.
Is this something that was an American culture that's gone away a little bit more recently? Is it starting to come back right now? How do you see that?
I feel like it's actually grown quite a bit. So there's been this progression of corporate philanthropy, which really started in the late 1800s and through the first half of 1900s. And then you saw this progression to cause-related marketing, and American Express was really the first ones to trademark that phrase and term it. And they actually renovated and rebuilt the Statue of Liberty. It was the Statue of Liberty restoration project. Through every new credit card sign up and a penny of every transaction, they were able to finally fund the restoration of one of our greatest pieces. That was in the late 1970s and early 80s was when the campaign started. A guy named Jerry Welsh, who I came into contact with, was their head of
he must have worked for Jim Robinson the third of the time.
He worked for Jim Robinson, who's your buddy, and I think Jim Robinson was the guy who introduced us, and he was a great thinker at that time. The idea that you would be able to market this cause and also market the business while doing it, and it was this win-win-win. But I think it was and it still is this great idea, but I think now going beyond it and again weaving it into your company culture, really making it part of your company's DNA from the beginning versus a temporary marketing campaign is this next progression. And I think we have more transparency into businesses than we used to, so we kind of get to see the people behind it, and I think people have that expectation, at least on the consumer side.
So transparency creates some kind of accountability, basically.
That's exactly right.
It is interesting because I guess you want the top talent's going to want to work for places that inspire them and what they're doing for the community. The customers are going to want it. The suppliers are going to want it.
Right. I mean, when I think about some of your greatest companies, they're incredibly purpose-driven, and the idea of solving the world's biggest challenges through these entrepreneurial solutions. For any great entrepreneur, for the best engineers, they want to solve these big challenges together. And I think being purpose-driven is something that is always going to create outsized returns for what you put into it. And you don't do it just for that, but it's certainly one of the good outcomes of it.
It certainly made it. I mean, when any business, including One Hope, had times when it wasn't working as well, had times when it had to be saved. It probably made people more likely to help you save it when it needed to be saved, that they did care about what it stood for, huh?
I don't know, Joe. It's always been up and to the right for us. Just nice, smooth path, like all startups, right?
Like all startups. Yeah, from the outside, it looks easy.
It always looks, if you're a really great brand, it always looks bigger than it actually is, and it always looks easier than it is, and you have to make it that way. You don't want to drag your customers through the bumpy stuff.
You don't want them to have to see the challenges. Well, right now the brand honestly is very strong, and you honestly are growing quickly. What a lot of people right now are pessimistic about the country. You're obviously part of building something really successful and helping a lot of people, so you must have a lot of optimism around you. What would you say to those who are pessimistic and who are worried about America?
I've never found that an abundance of pessimism has created the greatest things in this country. And the opposite I have found quite true. Abundance of optimism can create great things. I mean, we have hope in our brand name, right? One Hope. One is about uniting people and bringing them together, and hope is our product. I used to think about our service being wine tastings, but our service is actually bringing people together around the table to drink wine and have food and create memories. And our product, I used to think about being wine, but our product's really hope. And so when I think about these companies, if you want to have a chance, it's hard even if you are an optimist, but if you're a pessimist, there's a very, very small chance you're ever going to make it. And why would you be a pessimist? We're living in the greatest time, at least a standard of living that we ever have across the world. People have better lives than they've ever had. We took a little dip there in life expectancy for a micro generation, but we're on the way to where people are expected to live to like 150 that are being born now. And if people actually look at where we've come relative to where we are, it's pretty obvious that we're living in this great, amazing time. And even if you just zoom down on our company, right? This idea that we're democratizing the opportunity to get in the wine industry. When have you ever had a fair market in the wine industry? And that's just one example of free markets finally starting to come into play, decentralization coming into play. And I think actually governments, overall are doing a good job in the most industrialized and progressed nations. And
they're letting more players in and making it so the big guys can't stop the little guys as much.
I think so. And I think we have people like you and friends of ours that are fighting for the little guys as big guys. And you didn't used to see that happen. You used to see the big guys get big and then say, okay, now I'm going to protect what I have and cut everybody else out. And Napa was a little bit that way. There are some old guard people here who are like, we don't want the competition.
Not everyone wanted you to build this winery. This was a tough thing to get done.
Exactly, because you don't want somebody building the coolest new thing right across the street from you.
The guy across the street wasn't so happy with this.
I don't think so. And but at the end of the day, the family who made Napa what it was in the last generation,
they've been very helpful.
They've been very helpful.
The Mondavis want to see more people like you.
Yeah, the Mondavis, the Staglins have been great to us. The Renteria family, who's one of the great farming families and has their own great brands. And so we've been lucky enough to have some of the old guard players say, here, let me help you in. Let me put my arm around you and welcome you into this community. And I'm going to make sure that I do that for the next guys coming along too, because I think that's what legacy is about. It's not just about hoarding it all to your brand. It's about thinking about the entire community rising together and being one of the great players amongst them. But we can all win, when we take that mentality.
Jake, how can people support One Hope?
Thanks for asking, Joe. OneHopeWine.com. You can go there and buy wines. You can sign up for our wine club. You get free shipping, 4 or more bottles. And also, we have this beautiful, beautiful winery in the heart of Napa Valley. It's private to a collective of people. We call it the 2020 Collective. It's ultimately going to be 2,000 people doing 20 significant acts of hope together each year, like building a school, bringing clean drinking water to a community, things like that. And you can apply for that on onehopewine.com as well. Look for 2020 Collective. And so those are the 2 main ways. If you're anybody out there who's interested in getting into the wine industry and getting a wine education and getting access to inventory and technology and the ability to start your own business for a very small amount, you can join us as well. Join our community of over 10,000 women who are sharing wine and giving hope. So go to onehopewine.com and the journey begins there.
Awesome. Thanks, Jake.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it, buddy.